Hi there. Welcome to the Right Here, Right Now live show. This show has one simple question. What's on your heart and mind right here, right now in this moment? We explore the depths and breadths of our humanity through that one simple question over the course of 30 to 45 minutes. I hope that you'll join us. I hope you'll enjoy the exploration. And this tune was created for me personally by the incredible Peter Griffiths, one half of the amazing Mind Takeaway. Do let us know what you think. Let us know what you take away. And of course, we always welcome challenges too. Hope to see you on the exploration. Hi there, good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Now going live with the Right Here, Right Now live show, and I'm really excited to be bringing my good friend and emerging collaborator, Sahana, into the conversation shortly. But before I bring her on, I just want to remind you, if you're watching us live or listening to us back on the Activating Consciousness podcast, there is a wonderful in-person event coming up across the 20th and the 21st of July 2022 in just 5 weeks' time. The second time, Joe Homstead and I have come back with a human development space. 2 days, co-creation. We bring into the space what we want. We learn and share whatever's on our heart and mind. We co-create the experiences together. It's a very different type of event, but one actually that was quite inspired by my guest today, Sahana, in many ways. So again, Joe Homstead and I are co-facilitating across the 2 days. If you're curious, drop Joe or myself a line and it will be wonderful to have a chat a bit more with you about it. So without further ado, good afternoon, not even early evening to you, Sahana. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, thank you, Gary, and good morning to you. Morning, right?
It is
Uh,
morning, just afternoon, just tipping
ah,
in, just tipping.
just a minute. And good afternoon, good evening to everyone else, whoever is listening in. So thank you for the session and for having me here, Gary.
Oh, well, it's lovely to have you back on. There's not many people that have come back on twice so far, so I'm really excited to, yeah, just see where we go today, really, Shahana, with everything that's going on in the world, your
I
amazing
know.
writing around emergence, and even a little collaboration that you and I are playing with at the moment. So maybe that will pop out of the out in the conversation at some point. So what is on your heart and mind at the moment, Shahana? I'm really intrigued as we go into the start of this new so-called week.
Ah, wow, that's a that question always triggers, or should I say, inspires so many different threads in my heart and soul. So, quite a few things actually, Gary. And since we last spoke, and I guess primarily for the last few months, and you might have gleaned that from my LinkedIn posts, organizations have been kind of high on my mind, priority, if I may say so.
Mm-hmm.
And not only because I come from a background in the corporate, and I was there 18 plus years, and since then a solopreneur, but still working, partnering, hoping to with organizations that wish to transform. I think there are a few other reasons. To me, it feels as if, I mean, the world seems to be the planet rather, seems to be on a cusp, a tipping point, and the tipping point is seems to be almost towards where we are tipping over into some kind of chaos. The chaos is there, but can we draw back, pull back in time, or do we pull back, or do we leap across the chasm into a very different future? So how do we do it? Pulling back into what was deemed normal, quote unquote normal, but that we accepted as normal but not really normal, or do we leap over the chasm? And to me, I feel as if organizations are posed to play a very critical role if they wish to. I mean, organizations can continue doing what they've always done. Most organizations, when I say most, I'm saying like 99%. I'm sure there is a 1% or 2% who are still doing things differently, who have always done things differently. But 99%, 98% of the organizations, if they continue doing what they've always done, which is what I say, the three P's: profit, productivity, and privilege. If those are the driving factors and they continue to be, then we are in a big mess, my friend. A huge mess. And I'm not holding organizations solely responsible, but why I'm focusing on organizations is because I feel, having been part of many multinational organizations in the course of my corporate career, that organizations do have the power and the capacity to transform things, to transform themselves, and to transform the community they are embedded in, and hence the larger society from which, of course, they themselves arise. Now, what happens? And I've been thinking about this a lot, and sometimes I feel like I'm speaking to myself, everything is echoing in my own head. Um, so we've always lived, at least in our known history, lived with the metaphor of organizations as machines, coming from the uh, Newtonian physics and Taylor's idea of scientific work and all of that. And we've always perceived organizations as machines that need to become more and more productive, more and more efficient, and more well run. And of course, when digital technology came with the internet and other aspects, and AI and robotics and all of that, machine learning, we've just taken efficiency to a whole new level, algorithmically and as far as mechanically possible. But what we have sacrificed, and a lot has been sacrificed at the altar of productivity and efficiency, are the human factor, is the fact that an organization is not a machine. It is not a machine. It is a living, breathing ecosystem, a living system of human beings, which can thrive, which can grow if allowed to do so, if nurtured and nourished in the right way. But that means, I guess, reimagining the entire organizational metaphor from the ground up. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of very good thinking and writing and ideas in the space of regenerative design, regenerative businesses, and there are lots of very critically thoughtful people who are contributing to that. But and I, my deepest fear is that we will end up doing all of that on the substratum of the old narrative without shifting the old underlying narrative of organization as a machine of productivity meant to increase profit year on year, quarter on quarter, meant to focus on the bottom line and appear somewhere in some stock exchange and increase some shareholders value. If everything we do on top of that will be like putting lipstick on a pig or just a bolt on strategy. And that's my deepest fear, that unless we probe deeper, unless we shift the metaphor through which we view the organization, unless we shift the entire narrative of organization from the three P's, like I said at the outset, to, and I don't have a ready answer, and I don't think a single answer exists or even should exist. There will be multiple pathways, and each of those pathways could be equally regenerative, generative, and thriving. And those pathways are something that we have to collectively co create, collaborate over, and that will happen through conversations, dialogues, experiments, and not accepting the past as the BAU, as the normal. Because it was a story carved by a handful of men. They are not carved in stone. That's not universal truth. That's not like the sun rises in the east. that we have to keep on and on repeating the same old again and again. We can reimagine the narratives.
So, so beautiful. Thank you for sharing all that, Shahana. And I've not heard you speak about the three P's actually before in that way, which is really powerful, particularly the privilege piece. So, what's come up for me as you were sharing was this. For some reason, I had connected, centered, just relations centered, like ensuring that the ecosystem of an organization really does connect the different parts of the system, but centered. Yeah, so it's not trying to pull someone from the extremity into the system. It's everybody is in the center of the system, then somehow everything happens from there. And then I had co-liberative, like so the co-liberation piece of that as well. So what would it be like to move towards a more just centered relation organization, more connected, more co-liberative? You know, and it's just and that's all possible, right? Again, if you just
Yep,
change the
yep,
narrative,
yep,
like it's not about any one person having the key anymore, right?
yep,
It's not that
yep,
big
yep.
CEO or the big private equity or the banker or the government leader, right? It's unlocking the key in everybody for the first time somehow.
Yep, yep, and precisely, Gary. And that's what keeps me, I think, really excited that we are. I mean, we can literally sense it. We are shifting away from this homogeneous one narrative running the show, whether it's the planet or whether it's organizations. That one single narrative running the show is no longer working. And it was never meant to work. It worked. I mean, it worked for some people for some time, and other people played along because, well, it more or less kind of benefited some, and those it didn't benefit, those on the absolute margins were never even considered, ever, any which ways. So, I believe that whole homogeneous, mostly Eurocentric narrative is collapsing because, again, that narrative has come. It's kind of a spin-off of the Enlightenment era, the age of reason, the age of science, whatever you call it, and it has kind of trickled down into this form where everything has been quantified, everything is seen through the lens of I call it resourcification. Everything has been resourcified. Humans, nature, living things, living beings, planet, buildings, everything is a resource. You know, that labor, capital, and assets, everything has become resources. Unless we can get out of the mindset of resourcification of and come back to not only humanification, but come back to our whole a deep rooted belief in the interconnectedness, like you said, the relatedness, and to use Thich Nhat Hanh's phrase, the word interbeing. And if that becomes the driving philosophy, and I'm not saying it's an easy change because the narrative is too deeply rooted. It has its tentacles everywhere, right from the academia to, to organizations, to bureaucracy, to everything. Everything has been touched by it. That has been touched by the tar brush or something. I don't know what it's called, but it has been touched by that narrative. Now, how do we re- and I would say that it's that narrative is no longer worth fighting for, or rather, worth fighting against. I mean, there's no point in flogging a dead horse. Let's assume it's going towards its own collapse. But what is the new narrative that we can reimagine together? In this case, it's not a single narrative, multiple narratives, multiple kinds of work that are generative, that can actually take us towards a more thriving, flourishing, not only planet, but to each human being. So, and I'm not see, each one of us might feel we are like tiny specks, and each one of us can feel extremely helpless about whatever is happening on this planet and say, oh my God, what can I do? But I don't think we have to tackle the entire planetary challenge at one shot. What is my little corner of the blanket that I can mend and repair? Can I focus on that little piece and do my piece in that? and do my piece with some of the values embedded in it, values of, like I said, regenerative values. I mean, there's a lot of talk about regeneration and regenerative businesses. To me, regeneration is not a framework or a model or a pathway. It's it's a set of living, breathing values. It's kind of an ethos that each one of us interprets in our own way, but we are bound by that ethos of, I would say, deep respect for all living beings, deep love for myself and others. Because if I don't love myself, I can't love anyone else. And a deep sense of, I would say, not even deep sense, a deep desire to be part of co creating a world that works for all in whichever way I can. It might be by teaching some children in the slums. It might be by building two homes for the homeless. It could be even something as apparently mundane, not mundane, important, I would say, by working against the how technology is built for obsolescence.
Hmm.
What if technology companies decided not to build for obsolescence, but to build to make things last, to make things repairable, to reduce the waste? So, so wherever we are, in whatever work we are doing, can we change the ethos from those three P's to something different, to a co-created narrative that inspires me to be part of something larger, that inspires me to get up and go to work, that inspires me to be part of a community, an intentional community that organizations can become. Organizations are living ecosystems. They are intentional communities cohering around a shared purpose. Can I feel into that, and can I be a part of that? Something that is really meaningful. I don't want to keep making profit for a shareholder. I don't even know. That's blasphemy in the organizational world, but that's the old narrative, right?
Bless me. I love it. I just want to play back, Shahana. Respect, love, and co-creation as three narratives, three stories, three ways of being that can help us reimagine. Right? They're great
Yep.
foundations, Shahana. And I think I've been so I'm sitting here now listening to this, and I'm getting to know you as well, and I can totally not only feel your passion for this, but the real it's pragmatic, right? What we're inviting here is a like how do you apply this in your own life? Like for me, that could be as simple as how do I make sure I don't just throw something away that can be reused, right? I think twice about that. Is there someone down the road that might make use of that tool, for example, that I no longer need that they could use? That's one super local example. Or it might be in an organizational context. It could be, hey, I've realized that that person doesn't actually say very much, or they don't tend to get much airspace whenever we come together in a meeting. Is it because they're an introvert, or are they actually quite scared to speak up? How can I try and involve them or find out where they're at exactly and what space might need to be created for them? So there's all these really seemingly small actions, right? But together, Shahana, they can all really add up, can't they?
Yep, 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 absolutely. And the last example, what that triggered for me or brought to my mind is this whole question of leadership. When I say leadership, I I do believe that there will be leaders. Okay. And when I say leaders, I'm not conflating that with positions vested in someone because of their executive authority or because of their positional power. No, I mean leadership from a completely different lens and sense. Leaders, I would say, going ahead in the future, if we have to, if we, not if, when, because we must reimagine our organizations, we must give them a new lease of life. Right now, they have become, they are dead. They are dead.
Mm.
They are literally like. dead horses being flogged and flogged and flogged some more, injected with, like you would put a patient in an ICU. The current organizational systems, I would say, ICU have become these AI and robotics and whatever, kind of supporting a structure that actually should be dismantled to make that structure go as far, a little more, the algorithms and whatever. But the jobs have fragmented and fractured. If you look at the platform capitalism bit, jobs have become so fragmented that people on the platform end picking up work, picking up the gig economy, so to speak, and doing their bits are totally disconnected from the bigger picture, totally disconnected from the organization. They come in, do something, go away. Or they come in and pick up bits and pieces of work across 5 or 6 platforms and do it because they need the money. But what about the bigger picture? What about the shared intention? What about the overarching purpose? Where is the meaning in an algorithmically driven platform capitalism of gig economy? So, what kind of leadership paradigm shift does this entail? So, I feel I kind of feel sorry for today's leaders who have been schooled, or rather who have been shaped by forces that have forced them, or that have taught them, or that have incentivized them to become aggressive, hyper competitive, this typical alpha male kind of a personality. Even women had to emulate it to rise anywhere in any organization, right? So there had to be a suppression, and I'm sure there is a human side to everyone. So they had to be suppressed repeatedly till you produced this alpha, hyper competitive, hyper analytical, hyper rational, hyper logical individuals, so called, who became the leaders. And they were incentivized to stay so, right? Now you have generations of such human beings whose humanity has been stripped from them and who have received praise and accolades for their dehumanized self and have been called leaders. But they will not do for the organization of the future. They will not. The organization of the future, like you said, depends on relatedness, on relationships, on deep systems thinking, which needs humility, on deep interconnectedness. So you need a complete paradigm shift in leadership, and all those MBA schools teaching leaders to be who they have become either have to completely transform themselves or they must be shut down. I know they won't be shut down. I know they can't transform themselves overnight. A lot is invested in them. They receive regular, huge amounts of funding to churn out such leaders. But what is stopping us from creating another school of leaders or creating the narrative for those capable of donning a different kind of leadership mantle? A leadership that is nurturing, facilitated leaders, leaders who are stewards. You can't have a manager who sees everything as a resource in charge of an organization which wishes to be regenerative, thrivable. Because a thriving organization has no place for resourcification. So that's a different world. Resourcification, productivity, efficiency, quantification, privilege, power, and the other world, thriving, regenerative, nurturing, stewarding, an unyielding belief in human potential, an ability to hold space for diverse narratives and human beings so that they can come together to create something meaningful. Is that so difficult, or is it possible?
I love your visioning, and something I wrote down just now, Shahana, as you shared that is, and I'm thinking ahead for anyone that's watching us live. Shahana and I have got a project we're thinking about in terms of how do we bring to life and offer a space for those to reimagine their corporate narratives, right? And one of the things
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, one of the questions that maybe could be offered into that space, Shahana, is take money and status out of the equation for the next 5 minutes. Close your eyes and imagine how you want work to look and feel.
Yeah.
And let's explore that together and go round in a circle. Yeah, okay, I'd like work without money and status in the way. I'd like it to be like this, feel like that, experience this. I can almost guarantee those two worlds will look vastly different.
So it's almost what you're saying, Gary. To me, feels like reimagining the organizational narrative is also similar to decolonizing our imagination. Right now, our imagination is captured by the narrative that's running the show, right? The old narrative of individualism, extreme separation from nature, everything to be analyzed in a reductionist way. Um, the emotions have to be kept out of the business, and everything rational is good, everything quantifiable is good, everything that can be measured is good. And the dictum, what can't be measured can't be seen, or something like that. I mean, all of those have become such bywords that we've taken them for truth, but they're not. They are a very cleverly concocted narrative which have survived for almost two centuries almost, and they have been added to, and they have gotten a lot of powerful support because they helped to maintain the status quo, and they infiltrated our education, they infiltrated our communities and every structure and framework and policies and legalities to such an extent that the narrative itself has become invisible. And we don't realize what is really driving the show because the narrative is not visible. And what exists we accept as truth, as if it has always existed, so as if it wasn't man-made. And man, I'm using for man, the gendered man.
Yeah. And most of them look like me, right?
Yep,
By coincidence.
unfortunately.
By coincidence.
So, but there is a whole beautiful world out there beyond this man-made world created by a handful of men. So where are those narratives? Where are those unseen, unheard, delegitimized narratives? Can they be woven together, strands of them woven together to create a whole new set of narratives for us to live by? And like I'm fond of saying, we live in a pluriversal planet, but we are desperately trying to deny its pluriversality and turn everything into a singular. Why? On one hand, organizations talk about diversity and inclusion, but bring true diversity into an organization, there is a great deal of commotion and there is an absolute ruckus about how do you make everything conform to a standard. D&I has become a checkbox, but it's not meant to be a checkbox. It can't be a bolt-on strategy, right? And so, if we really piece apart, I mean, the old narratives, you suddenly see the straw man for what it is. It's just something created by some folks, and that got publicity, and that got propaganda, and that just survived for 2 centuries. Okay, so what?
So what is the brilliant question, right? So as you know, Shahana, so I myself had testicular cancer 2 years ago, right? And it is really interesting. It's the first time that at a felt level, I felt what's happening to the planet, truly. Because my growth in my right testicle went from being a tiny pimple to being the weight and size of a hockey ball within just 8 weeks. Okay? It was that aggressive. Now, if you look at what's happening on the planet right now with all of our systems within the workplace, on Mother Earth herself, if that's the pressure on just me as one single human being, with a lot of privilege, with a lot of access, but I've still got that felt lived experience of that growth within my body, I'm only starting to imagine the truly oppressive impacts that we're having due to these old narratives, right? And I think what's really hopeful, and I share your hope around this, we're one changed thought from shifting the whole paradigm.
Yeah. Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's not just one person, right? That's all of us. Like if we can find the confidence and we can create the space for one another to hear each other's narratives, we can, as you say, we can reweave and co-create those narratives. It doesn't have to come from the top, right? This is a really
No.
important point. We're not waiting, Shahana, for someone to say, here's the new world, right?
Yep. No one is going to hand us a new world. And I mean, no one will hand anyone a new world. Will the so called powers that be ready to change the narrative? No. Why should they? It's working for them, it's working for the 1%. So, why do we think that 1% at the top will even want to change it? No, they will put in everything behind them to stop the change. But that doesn't mean they can stop the imagination, right? No one can stop anyone from imagining a more vibrant, anti fragile, thriving planet. Even so, this reminds me of a little narrative that I read in a Wangari Maathai's book about this little hummingbird. Do you know the story of the hummingbird?
I think I do know, but please share it as a reminder for me and for our guests as well. That'd be wonderful.
So, this hummingbird, there's the huge forest fire, and the fire is engulfing the forest. And animals are fleeing, the large and small, the ones that can run and walk and crawl and fly, they are just fleeing the forest because everyone wants to save their lives, right? Every life wants to live. Every little living being wants to live. And they're fleeing desperately. And there is this one tiny hummingbird that's going to one stream at the distance, picking up a speck of water and flying back to the forest, and doing so back and forth, till another animal asks it, "What are you doing? You'll get burnt. Let's just fly away." So the hummingbird says, "No, I'm trying to put out the fire." So the animal laughs. The bigger animal just laughs. He says, "Are you crazy with that one tiny drop of water? You're going to put out the fire?" So the hummingbird says, "So what? I can still do my bit." And so it's almost like we are hummingbirds. We can feel helpless, or we can choose not to feel helpless. Or that little, the final snowflake that brought the branch down. That was one flake of snow that finally brought the branch down. And so
Beautiful.
I guess if we can collectively reimagine narratives, if organizations, maybe the small, mid-sized ones, because larger ones, like I said earlier, are Titanics which can't turn around rapidly enough. Um, Mid-sized ones can reimagine their purpose, or at least go back to the purpose that they began with, because I'm sure no one began with the purpose of making shareholder profit. Every organization has a heartfelt purpose at its core that along the way gets, I would say, covered in dust and grime.
Mm, nice. I love that, Shahana. I just want to acknowledge. I hope I'm not pronouncing your name incorrectly. Rukia. I'd love to make sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think it's a beautiful question. Where do we see a different narrative and its successful manifestation in a business context? So, I don't know if you've got any ideas. I'll start with one, Rukia. Again, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Um, so there are some companies, even within my sector. So I work within the chemicals industry, and there's the first ever self-managed, fully democratic chemical manufacturer and distributor called Latro. Latro, based in Turkey. It's a company of 50 people or 55 people, and the CEO fired himself around 2 years ago. Sahana, is an amazing story, and he completely decentralized power to the teams. They do a lot more collective decision making. They decide how much to put in the fund for sustainability and for local projects. So that's one example that I can share, and I can share some more details on that if that's helpful. Is there anything else? Do you have any examples of new narratives being implemented in a positive way, Shahana?
Yeah. So, like I said, an organization on the entire organization may not shift overnight, maybe not able to shift overnight, but pockets of change keep happening. I've been in an organization, I've worked personally in the organization where in one of the projects, the project got cancelled. Okay. And so this team, the project team was sitting around, and this was in Bangalore, was sitting around because that their project got cancelled and they suddenly were on the bench for about at least for the next foreseeable 2 weeks or so. So they went to a slum that was really one of the in India we have rack pickers where rack pickers live. No electricity, nothing. And they built on that slum, on the roofs of the slum, and this was like at least a decade back, on the roofs of the slum, they built the solar panels for the slum dwellers to have access to electricity, to light and fan. And they spent their next 3 weeks doing that because their project got cancelled. The company didn't gain anything. They just let the 3 weeks, let the engineers, the set of 20 or 25 odd people of the project team do what they wanted as part of their own drive and passion. So, if I believe that a certain amount of autonomy and like kind of leaders who can be stewards, who can nurture human potential, can give people that sovereignty, that that sense of self power to do what is essential, to do what they feel is meaningful. And in these pockets, and especially I think in organizational fringes, these small pockets of imagination happen. Only thing is they don't get the highlights, or they are never noticed, or they don't get the support of the larger organization. But if the underlying narrative were to shift gradually, and those shifts and what I call the micro shifts can add to the underlying narrative shift, what you finally get gradually, maybe it will take time. I mean, if the old narrative lasted for 200 years, the new narrative will be co-created over a period of time, but there will come a tipping point when it will when it will start spreading, when it will, for example, how many people even used the word regenerative in in relation to business and organizations 5 years back, but now that term is picking up. But my fear is, again, it will become a buzzword, another word that organizations tag onto themselves while doing the typical lipstick on a pig activity. That's my fear.
I share the same fear, and it's a phrase that I've learned a little bit with you and with the Possible Futures crew, with Sam and Anna, etc. But I feel it in my body as well, honestly, is at this time, you mentioned earlier about this almost colonized imagination somehow. Like we've been really, yeah, we've dumbed down, we've really narrowed our focus on of what's possible. And I almost see a recolonization. So we've got an opportunity right now to allow this colonized imagination to go, to reimagine bigger, much more abundant, much more connected, much more, yeah, just everything's possible, right? But
Yep.
at the same time, the old system is really, it's almost like the last hurrah. It's like the last throw of the dice. And it's really grabbing hold with all it can.
Yep.
And I'm seeing within the chemicals industry, for example, of which I'm part, there's a lot of very well-intentioned technological developments, carbon capture, lots of alternatives for improving water usage, etc. But Shahana, who owns those companies? Who funds those companies? it's all coming from the old one world thinking still.
Exactly.
And I think
Exactly.
this is very, very important that we name
Yes.
this risk right at this time. It's great that all this stuff's happening, but we must stay very conscious of where is the money
Yes.
coming from, who's involved, who's
Yes.
deciding still, right?
Yes. And that's the crux, Gary, because right now, I mean, if you see across the planet, and it's not in one specific country or one specific state, across the planet, across nations and nation states, there is this rise in extreme fragmentation and polarization, extreme othering of someone different, extreme, almost authoritarianism to the point of fascism. So why are these happening? A, people are frustrated with the old story, but they don't know, or there isn't a new story that they can step into. They don't see hope. So people who feel hopeless can be very easily swayed. People who don't see a future for themselves can be very easily swayed into blaming someone else for whatever they are going through. It's very, very easy. And it's happening everywhere. I'm seeing it in India every day. And it's happening everywhere. So, like you said, I'm afraid that just the whole ethos of regeneration will be co-opted by the ones holding the current status quo, and will become another bolt-on strategy, like we've seen in the past with the Green New Deal and a lot of things that are not really, that had lots of potential but didn't go the way they could have gone, but and just became another checkbox activity, just like diversity and inclusion. So regeneration, one more checkbox, three things to be done under it, four workshops a year. And that's what I'm scared of. That's what, because this is, and I keep thinking, and I was making a note, that as long as we thought of organizations as machines, machines have neither consciousness or conscience. But when we think of organizations, not think, when we know in our heart and soul that organizations are living, breathing ecosystems, living, breathing ecosystems have consciousness, have conscience, are awareness based, then we can't play around with bolt on strategies. Then we need to also really work on the soil on which these seeds will fall. And the soil, I believe, is the narrative, the underlying narrative that I, and no one can, I mean, not, no one can create that narrative alone. It's not a single individual's narrative ever. It's no longer a one world that five people will sit around a table and decide, oh, this is what organizations of the future will be like. No, no. But how do we prepare the soil for those narratives to arise, so that the seeds of regeneration and whatever is being planted take healthy roots and doesn't become another, just a layer of superficial bandaging on the top.
And Shahana, what a beautiful invitation. I'd love to, maybe as we go to start to wrap up today, is how can each one of those human beings that's either watching us live now, maybe they'll watch or listen back to us, what's the invitation to that individual that may hear this message? That invitation of like, okay, it's possible, it's big system stuff, it's all connected. I'm, those people that might be thinking, as I've felt in the past myself on occasion, who am I? I'm just one person. But you're just one person who can what? I'd love for you to maybe put out some invitations, some curious
I know.
invitations for people.
Yeah, I think I would, what I would like to perhaps invite people into, and I'm saying this with, I don't yet have the words, but I'm trying to invite people into reimagining, I wouldn't say rethinking because we've thought too much. Can we give vent to our imagination? Reimagining a kind of organization that you would like to get up and walk into every morning, that you would like to be your children, you would like your children to be a part of in the future, that you would like the narratives of that organization to become an inspiration to the future generations to carry forward and say that, such and such organizations really made a difference even as the planet was falling apart. Such and such a purpose, such and such leaders who stewarded, nurtured those organizations, had the courage to envision and dream of something that was different, even in the face of a burning, falling apart planet. Can What would that be? I don't know. I honestly don't. But this is an invitation actually I've been repeating to myself, that every time I think of a corporate, I keep thinking no matter if I enter a large corporate, no matter whatever the corporate is, in my role, I can continue to uphold these values and ethos. In my role, maybe as an OD consultant, as an L&D uh, learning and development person, I can continue to live by these values in my role, no matter in what organization. So, is that a possibility?
It's a beautiful invitation, Johanna. I'd love to build on that if I may as well, and say, as someone myself that still works in the corporate, really in the centre of the extractive, chemicals industry, right, the centre of pretty much the old one world.
Mm.
There are more and more people, including senior leaders, that want to be in this dialogue. Because I'm speaking to them, but there's this very strange mix of perceived comfort, privilege, and fear. And my invitation is, listen to what Shahana just shared and imagine, just for a moment, again, give yourself 2 minutes of permission to let that comfort go, let the fear go, let any of those stories, the old one world stories that are going on in your mind, and just sit in that. What would you want this workplace to look and feel like if you didn't have the pressure on the next quarter results? If you wasn't worried about buying another company? If you wasn't worried about getting one over on the next person down the hallway from you? If none of those energies were around you, how would you want to work, and what would you want to design that work to look and feel like for you, your kids, the future generations that are coming through? And most importantly, for me, those people as part of your supply chains that you never ever think or hear of. Like, just everything's up for grabs, Shahana, and I got in some quite dark places in months gone by, honestly, around all of this, because it is tough. But I'm coming back up the cycle now, very much in line with where you're at around this. We need to be able to hold the realities of where we are and be brave and excited about imagining what can become, right? It's both of those things, that pluriversal world. It's not either or, it's both, which I think is quite
Yep.
exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, I know I've had people call me idealistic and optimists and whatever. The point is, and I keep thinking that no matter how impossible it had seemed, someone imagined that they could put a man on the moon. Someone imagined that there could be cure for cholera. Someone imagined that polio could be stopped. I'm sure those had seemed impossible at some time. And I'm sure the people who imagined those might have been even called insane. Galileo was. And so the point is, nothing is impossible. And I'm not saying this in a kind of just to say it. unless we really, unless we're willing to reimagine a better, and I'm consciously using the word better because I think somewhere we have conflated better with too many materialistic things. And I'm not against things per se. Yes, basic things for comfort, basic things, I'm not against that. But there is a limit to things and thingification that can, after a point, how many mobile phones do you need? How many cars? How big a house? How much, how big a burger can one eat? And so the point is, it's not even about loss of comfort. It's about, I would say, knowing when it is enough. It's just knowing when there is abundance. And each one of us have to have our enough. I mean, I know if I had a huge mansion, I would hate it. I need my place to be as much as I need, and it's cozy and comfortable, my gardens and my room and my books. What would I do with 10 extra rooms and 20 extra bathrooms? What on earth would I do with? I'm still a human being who will die one day. What will I do with all of these things? So I almost feel that, this extreme thingification and individualization and glorification of, pardon me, but people like Elon Musk and that ilk has made people see these. I'm not saying they're not right, they are on one aspect, but on all other parameters, they are like overgrown adolescents who have stopped growing after that, who just want. But if each one of us lived like that, or wanted to, imagine what an unhappy planet this would be. So I guess when we know our enough, then everything seems abundant. And then we can reimagine our new stories.
Right, if this is a mic, Shahana, I'm just going to drop it because I think that's the perfect. that's that's an incredible way. What an incredible way to wrap up. If we know our enough, everything is abundant. I think that's just absolutely stunning. Wow,
Thank you.
wow, Shahana, you your depth, your clarity, and I don't think you are idealistic. I just think you've got a knowing that not everybody feels comfortable to speak to. And I'm looking forward to that being more commonplace for people to feel they can speak their imagining, how they're feeling, what they can envision, right? Without fear, without holding back. Hopefully that time's coming.
Thank you, Gary. And I just want to wrap up by saying thank you for holding space incredibly. And if my imagination speaks, it's because you create that space for it to speak. And maybe, and here is one, maybe people like you need to become leaders of tomorrow, stewards and nurturers, facilitative leaders. Then organizations will be different. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. It's very kind of you. I appreciate that kind feedback. And I think, as you said, it's going to take us all. And my
Yes.
final invitation from today is if you joined us, thank you. If you watch this back or listen back, thank you. Do please check out Shahana's work. I popped it up on LinkedIn. You can also find Shahana's previous Medium blogs at Age of Emergence at Medium. And let's just connect. You know, Shahana and I are really hoping. Look out for a campfire sometime near you. We'll put that little seed out, Shahana, because we've really got some nice imagining going on there as well. And I just want to, yeah, hopefully, as you've seen through this conversation today, very energetic, very exploratory, non-judgmental, and they're not all things I've been able to be in the past, to be honest. So yes, I think space holding, the ability to allow ourselves to speak our truth without judgment feels like a very important space, Shahana, and I thank you for inviting that for people as well. So thank you for showing up again as fully as you do today. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Have a good evening, Shahana,
Bye.
and take care, everyone.
Bye.
All the best.